give me 2 seconds. Yeah, okay. So again, only you who has the link can look at the record. And from the classes last year, students like it that they can have the. Okay. Just a second. Let me take care of the YouTube. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So who's going to do next? So probably I'll call the first person, and then after that, the next person will call the others. So I'll start with Safi, who is right beside me in my screen.
Okay, thank you, Pak Zainal. Hello, everyone. Hello, Pak Dicky. My name is Safi. I'm a student of ICRS from 2021. So I was about to finish my second semester. And then I actually very interested in taking this class because especially I'm going to focus my research on the interactions and also religious practice of the lay movements, especially in Southeast Asia. So I'm hoping that by taking this class, I would be able to improve my understanding about the basic human rights related with the religions practice, especially in Indonesia later. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm in Solo. I live in Solo.
Okay, you pick the next students.
Okay, just on the left side, Mas Ipung, please.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Maufur, but you can call me Ipung. I'm a first year student of ICRS, and I just began this semester actually, and I'm so excited with this course because it really fit to my research interest, which is on religious freedoms. And I live now in Kediri. Okay, thank you. Now I would like to wait. Adik Bibi, Mas Bibi.
Okay, thank you, Mas Maufur. Hello, Pak Dicky and Pak Zen. Nice to meet you all. Okay, my name is Bibi Suprianto. I'm from West Kalimantan, and I interest in this topic because I want to develop about ecology, politics, and religion. And my expectation join in this course, I want to develop my article about ambiguous in religious freedom, Islamic political strategies of Ahmadiyah conflict in West Kalimantan, and my research about political ecology of Tanah Adat conflict in West Kalimantan. Thank you. And I choose Mas Imam Permadi.
All right, thank you, Mas Bibi. Hi everyone, my name is Man Permadi, but I usually go by Adi. I'm eager to discuss with the rest of the students in this class, and my possible final paper will focus on the exhaustive debate on human rights. The question may be, has human rights law achieved more for humankind than religions? That is very exhaustive question for bring me into this class. So thank you. I'm living in Yogyakarta, but actually I'm originally from Surabaya. So I will choose Andi Alfian next.
Thank you, Mas Iman. How about my voice now? You can. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Pak Zen, Pak Dicky. Nice to meet you. I'm Alndi Alfian. I'm CRCS student now. My research interest is religion and gender, especially in youth and indigenous people. So I'm very excited to join this class, and I hope this class is fun and insightful. So I come from South Sulawesi, Makassar. Maybe that's all my introduction, and I choose Mbak Eli. Silahkan. Thank you.
Thank you, Pian. Hello, Pak Zain and Pak Dicky and everyone. My name Elidia Praptanti. You can call me Eli. I am a student of CRCS UGM batch 2021. I have an interest on indigenous religion and ecology, and now also in gender. So I hope I can learn more about human rights in relation to gender and indigenous religion. Thank you. I choose Akil next. Oh, I now I stay in Jakarta, but I came from Palangkaraya.
Or I thought you were in Salatiga, no?
No, Pak.
Oh,
Yeah, my parents in Kebumen.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Eli, for the opportunity. Hello, good afternoon, Pak Diki, and then Pak Zainal and friends. My name is Akil Syifratullah Putra. You can call me Akil. I'm from Banyumas, Central Java, and then my interest research is about the religion, gender, and disability. My expectation about this class, I wanna see and explore about the basic or fundamentalists about the human rights, and also we see about the human rights in gender and then in disability. Thank you. And then I want to choose Mbak Epon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas Akil. Hello, Pak Zain, Pak Dicky, and all of and everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. My complete name is Sofjan Christian Lihun. I'm come from Ambon in Maluku. Now I'm a student of CRCS batch 20 and 21. My interest for my research is actually about management conflict, peace building, and also I want to look at the management land of indigenous people in Maluku. So hopefully I join with this class, I can get enlightenment of human rights, and also it will help me to defend the, like Pak Zain just show for us. That is my introduction in the Padlet. It will help me to defend the rights of discriminated people. Thank you so much. For the next one, I will choose please Nadila.
Okay, thank you, my phone. Is it my voice clear? Because it's raining now here and the electricity is also off. So maybe I turn to my phone if my laptop battery is, So I'm Nadila Ika Arifianti. You can call me Nadila. I come from Kediri, but now I just stay in Yogyakarta. I have an interest, as Pak Zain show in the screen, on religious studies and religious freedom, gender issue, and also post-conflict society. So my expectation in this class, of course, I can get new and more knowledge in human rights related to this issue and others. Thank you. No, I choose Mbak Intan, please.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Pak Zen and Pak Dicky and all. I'm sorry because I cannot speak too much because I'm fever and because my toothache and I cannot also to switch on my camera. Yeah, here I'm Intan Novelia. Actually, I interest in indigenous religion, but I'm also interested in this topic because this because we have many problem about this topic. So yeah, this is maybe maybe interest for uh, my next research. Thank you, Pak.
Yeah,
I
thank
choose.
you, Intan. Have you filled in the Padlet? Not yet, I guess.
Not yet, Pak. Sorry.
Can you?
I have
Yeah.
just seen it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, please fill it in because this will become our album of the class. So
Okay.
I will share it later with all of you.
Okay, thank you, Pak. Maybe later I will soon.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I choose Mbak Ayu, please.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Christina. You can call me Ayu. I am from Karanganyar and I am student of CRCS UGM. And my interest research are gender, uh, religion and violence, Islamic tourism, and other. And I hope this class will be fun. And thank you. Okay, I will choose other, please.
Right. To begin with, I'm Rosi Ahdar. You may call me Ahdar. My interest is on the religion and spirituality and psychology. Unfortunately, this is the new field for me, so I'm very excited to come to the gate of this field. It's all. I will choose Mbak Ripka. Okay, I will hand over it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Pak Jen and Pak Dicky, for the opportunity I can join this course. My research interest is about minority groups, especially the indigenous groups, and also freedom of religion and or beliefs. And I take this course because now I kinda involved in fellowship program of freedom on religion or belief. And I hope this course will help me to understand more how to connect the freedom of religion or belief and rights of land or forest of the indigenous community in Indonesia. That's all. Thank you.
So
and now
you are from which batch, Mbak Ripka?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm now working at CRCS. I'm from batch 2014.
Yeah, so Mbak Ripka is a graduate of CRCS, and actually she just completed a film. She became part of a film on Sasi. You should watch it soon.
Yeah.
Has it been launched?
Yeah, last Saturday, but it's hasn't on YouTube now. We will upload it on YouTube soon.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Pak Jen. And now I move to Malang, please.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm outside. It's raining a lot. Hello everyone. Pak Zainal and Pak Dicky. Thanks Pak Zain invite me to this course. It's I'm Malang, original from Taiwan, and I'm currently visiting ICS for my research project about contemporary development of interreligious relation in Indonesia. And my explanation on this course, because I found it's very interesting to get to know the current situation of human rights and about religions. And I'm happy to share experience from more historical perspective to engage in the class. So I'm happy to learn more your insight and your opinion about human rights in the region, especially Indonesia, and we could share a lot and discuss a lot of in this class. Thank you.
Yeah, please choose one.
I will pick Victory.
All right, thank you so much. Hi everyone, hi Pak Zain, Pak Dicky. My complete name is Fikri Rinaldo Pais, but for short you can call me Fikri or just Fik. I'm from Ambon, Maluku province. Now I am a student of CRCS batch 21. My interest is on indigenous religion, interreligious dialogue, and Christian mythology. Well, the reason why I took this class is because human rights is an issue of our daily life. Is happening everywhere in every side of our lives. And the second thing is that I wanna complete my thesis related to the issues of indigenous religion, the relation of indigenous religion and Christianity. So I take it because the issues of human rights is involved in my thesis. Thank you so much. For the next, I will choose Shiera Anggreni.
Sorry, I forget to turn on the mic. Thank you, Mas Fikri, and also good afternoon, Pak Zainal and Pak Dicky and friends. Salam kenal. I'm sorry, maybe I cannot turn on the camera for most of the time because my Wi-Fi at the office is down and I'm using my phone to tethering and the connection is a bit unstable. So yeah, I'm a researcher at Sarah Institute. My research is actually my research should be more about FORB because I'm a researcher of FORB, but I'm new to this field. So that's why I would like to take this course and learn from you all. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
So, Shara, what did you do in your undergraduate?
I just got notified that the connection is unstable.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Yes, Prof. Saya izin matikan kameranya karena unstable.
Okay.
Java, and my dad is from Jakarta. And the reason why I want to take this course because I want to learn more about FORB. Yeah. And yeah, I really find your research interest, everyone's research interest in this Padlet is very interesting and hope we can discuss more and learn together. Thank you. Oh, yeah, the next one, Mas Paulus.
Yeah, Shara, if I may ask, what was your education in your undergraduate or master's? I don't know.
Oh yeah, my bachelor's was in international relations, and my bachelor's thesis was about transnational advocacy network of Dili Diocese in the self-determination of East Timor, and I took a master.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, I think your connection is it's not good. It's not stable.
Yeah, so sorry about my
yeah.
connection.
So have you picked the next student to introduce?
Yes, Mas Paulus. Oh, yeah, Mas Paulus, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Pak Zainal, Pak Dicky, and all of you. I am Paulus Eko Kristianto. I am a doctoral student at Duta Wardana Christian University. I'm concentrate or my research interest is philosophy, religious education, and contemporary theology. I take this course because I want to learn some knowledge and information about the improvement of religion and human rights because I not yet learn this topic deeper. So I want to get it in this course. Maybe I think it's enough. And can I choose another one?
So do we have everyone?
Okay. Maybe Pak Hengki, sorry, Eric Kaunang.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, Mas Eric, if you're there, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Erika Unang. I am actually a staff in ICRS as a researcher and also academic coordinator. And hopefully all of you can enjoy this class and will get a very good grade at the latest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Eric. So you should choose the next person, Mas Eric.
I think that's all, Pak Zen. Or we still have somebody that not yet introduced.
Yes, we do.
Mas Irfan.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, Mas Irfan, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, Pak Zen and Pak Dicky and everyone. I'm Irfan Saifuddin. I'm student of ICRS, batch 21. Also currently a lecturer in UIN, Raden Mas Said, Surakarta. Okay. I'm graduated from UIN Sunan Kalijaga. Subject Sharia. Then maybe the different one because my background is Sharia. Okay, my interest about interfaith marriage. Then I want to join this class because I think interfaith marriage become a controversial one and viral from the last years. Then I want to choose this as my research. Then I want to know more because this is minority and learning human rights and its application of and about religion is very important for my research. Then yeah, because of that I want to join this class. Thank you, Pak Zen, and I think Mbak Karen. You can introduce your name. Thanks, Mbak.
Hello everyone, my name is Karen Erina Primera. I'm sorry I'm late because I just come back from hospital because my father got hospitalized, and I came from Sidoarjo in East Java, and my interest is about religion, gender, and contextual theology, and I hope with I'm joining this class, I can get more comprehensive about a relationship between the religion and also human rights, and I hope it also relate with my interest. Thank you.
Okay, please choose the next person. I think there are still students who have not introduced. Yeah, there is at least one. So did you come late, Karen?
I'm sorry, Pa. I just joined
okay.
here because
Yeah.
I have to drive and just come back from hospital.
Okay.
Sorry, so I don't know the who.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think Andy, you have not introduced yourself, right?
I have Pak.
Oh, you did. Okay. So
Yeah, I
Sapitri.
I did.
Iman.
Hey, all
Yeah, Iman is done.
I think all of
So
us is done.
everyone is done.
Okay. Yeah, I think everyone has introduced themselves. Okay. Okay. Well, is there anyone who has not joined the Google Classroom? No? So, okay. So everyone, you are already in the Google Classroom. So that means hopefully you have looked at the syllabus. The Google Classroom has not finished yet. It's not 100%, but we'll improve that gradually. We are also trying to confirm a number of guest lecturers about the time, etc. So since the first time this class was offered, I mean, religion and human rights class, I think it was in 2017, 2017 or 2018. We always have many guest lecturers. Historically, actually, the first time we created this course, we did it together with a number of scholars from the Oslo Coalition for Freedom of Religion or Belief, and also from International Center for Religion and Law Studies. That's in Brigham Young University. So Professor Brett Scharf, who will be speaking to you the day after tomorrow, he comes from BYU, from ICLRS. And then we will also have other professors from the Oslo Coalition. And well, probably I'll jump a little. In the third week of July, actually, we will also have a conference on freedom of religion or belief in Jogja. It's an on-site conference. So yeah, I think you can join the conference. Well, actually, Ripka is one of the organizers. So maybe later Ripka can give you some information about it. But it will be a very interesting conference, I think. That's in 18th and 19th of July. And that's why in that week, we will not have a class because, yeah, a few of us will be there. I myself will also be busy there. So, but there'll be information about it later. So for now, I will share my slides to introduce the class in terms of the topics. Hopefully, probably in 20 minutes or so. And then after that, Dicky may have more things to say, and then we'll have discussion. If you have questions about anything, about the technical issues in this class assignment, etc., or about the topics itself. Screen. Yeah, okay. So yeah, today's agenda, we have done the introduction, and then now we'll so usually and I think probably many of you, especially CRCS and ICRS students, maybe in many classes, you start the classes with the questions about what is religion? If you have a class on religion and ecology, then it will start with the question, what is religion? What is ecology? So that's the same thing I want to do here, just to make sure we are on the same page. So when we discuss religion, we understand it in a broad terms. We understand religion as teachings, doctrines, but not only that, theology. Many people, when they think about religion, they think about teachings or theology, but religion is more than that. Religion is also institutions, movements, people. There is an approach in religious studies, for example, which is called everyday religion, looking at religion in everyday life. So we understand religion in a very broad sense. And well, in the first semester, when I asked a tricky question, how many religions we have in Indonesia, some people give number, but I think many of you are not that innocent now, so we don't number religion. Probably officially people say there are 6 religions in Indonesia, etc. But we do have many religions. When we speak about religion, we do not only speak about religions which are recognized by the state. That is the term which I will introduce shortly. That is governed religion. Religions in the eyes of the state. Religion which is defined by the state. So maybe you can number it, either 5, 6, or whatever. But in this class, we try to understand in a very broad sense. I mentioned here Elizabeth Schachman-Hurd in his book Beyond Religious Freedom. She started with explaining different types of religion: governed religion, lived religion, expert religion. Basically, governed religion is religion which is defined by the state. Expert religion is the religion which you all engage with. So it's scholars' religion. How scholars, researchers define religion, find religion in the field research, for example. So both governed religion and expert religion somehow require you to define it. But when we look at the reality of religion, that is lived religion, then it is usually is quite complex. It's undefined or too complex to be defined. So again, this class, the title of this class is Religion and Human Rights, and we understand religion in that broad sense. So these 3 different types of religion, governed religion, expert religion, lived religion, probably give you some ideas how religion may be defined for different purposes. So for us, it's not very important to define what is religion at this stage. So usually when you define religion, you define it for a certain purpose. So it's more important to ask, what is your purpose? Why you define a religion in one way or not the other? But basically, I think the spirit in the study of religion or in religious studies is that we cast a wide net to catch the phenomenon which may be named as religion in one way or another. So when we speak about religion, we may speak about teachings, we may speak about texts, we may speak about people, we may speak about organizations, etc. So in terms of governed religion, it's interesting. Well, I will give you I will assign the book by Elizabeth Schachman-Hurd later for one of the sessions. But one of her questions is human rights or freedom of religion or belief, the human rights regime. Does it also construct religion? Does it govern religion? Is the religion in human rights regime or in religious freedom regime? Is it a governed religion, or what type of religion is it? So for Elizabeth Schachman-Hurd, actually it is a type of governed religion, which means that it defines religion in a certain way. It when it says it gives freedom to religious believers, or when it says that the state has to protect religious freedom, then usually the kind of protections only applicable to certain types of religion. That would be one of Schachman-Hurd's criticisms. We're not going to discuss that now, but there will be one session about that. But I just mentioned it to give you a wider horizon about what kind of things are we going to discuss in this class. Okay, now what is human rights? Well, we call, I mean, in the media or even in everyday discussion, it's very easy to say, and we heard it a lot. People speak about violations of human rights. The state violates certain people's human rights. Or even now you also read in the media, for example, children reporting their parents to KPAI, Komite Perlindungan Anak, the National Committee for Protection of Children. There are cases, for example, children who report their parents saying that their parents violate their human rights. So is it possible that can we use this term, violating human rights, to the state, to parents, or to other people who can violate human rights? What is the subject which is asked to protect human rights, and then which also may violate human rights? Is it anyone, or is it focused mostly to the state? So in the daily life, sometimes it's not very clear what is human rights. People may claim, well, you violate my rights, for example. But what actually are rights? And what rights are protected? When you say that a certain people or the state violate human rights, does it mean that the state is acting unjustly, or in an immoral way, or in a tyrannical way, or what is it? What does it mean to violate human rights? So we need to be clearer later. We need to be more specific when we speak about rights, when we speak about violations of human rights. What actually do we mean? So we should not just casually use the term human rights or violations of human rights. Human rights may be understood as values or perspective, but in this class, most of the time, when we speak about human rights, we will refer to the international human rights regime. That is for example, you have the document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. And then there are many conventions and covenants created by the United Nations Human Rights Committee, for example. So when we speak about human rights, we will refer mostly to that regime. We will learn later that there are also, for example, Islamic declarations of human rights, or ASEAN declarations of human rights. Many of these newer documents, they also refer to universal declarations of human rights, the European human rights, for example, and then African human rights. Many of them, they refer to it, to the UDHR. There are some differences, but those differences will also be something interesting to discuss, and it has become a subject of debate. But the main reference point is the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. And when we speak about this, so the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, it's a document. It's part of the international agreement, and then the human rights instruments. Many of them are ratified by states. Many of them become domestic laws. I will show you in the case of Indonesia shortly. So in this case, when we speak about human rights, we don't speak about, and I'm using now Nichols' term in his book, Making Sense of Human Rights. When we speak about human rights, we don't speak about interpersonal morality, but we speak about international political morality. So it's a political project, and as a matter of fact, it is quite recent. It was created in the 20th century, 74 years ago. So in a sense, we can say it's quite recent. Pak Dicky later may also speak about the Declarations of Human Dignity, which was created a few years ago, commemorating the 17th years of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, as a way to revive again the commitment to human rights. But again, this is part of this international regime. So that's our main point of reference. And when we use that reference, then we may speak about treatises. We speak about institutions. There is Human Rights Committee. There is, for example, Universal Periodic Review, in which every 4 years, all countries, their commitment and their performance with regard to human rights are evaluated in the United Nations, in the Human Rights Committee. So there are institutions like that. There are court, human rights court, for example, and some of them are regional courts, like European human rights courts. We don't have it in ASEAN, but there are in Europe, for example. We speak also about norms, which is described in many international covenants or conventions, declarations. So there are these three different things: covenants, and then conventions and declaration. You will learn what are the differences between this later. I think probably in Brad Sharp's class the day after tomorrow. And then also mechanisms. If there are violations of human rights, what are the mechanisms to report that, starting from the national to the international level. So this is what constitutes, or what sometimes scholars call as human rights regime. It comprises of treaties, institutions, norms, and mechanism. In Indonesia, we already have it actually, well, not specifically a Bill of Rights, but in the 1945 Constitution, that is 3 years before the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, there are already certain rights listed in our Constitution. Remember, this is even before the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. One of them, which is very famous, for example, and relevant to us, is freedom of religion, Article 29. And then, well, if you look at the history of the constitutional debate, then you will also find very interesting debate about human rights. And you may be surprised or not, many of the founding fathers, our founding fathers, they actually disagree to include human rights in the Constitution. And that includes Sukarno. There was discussion about whether a Bill of Rights or human rights is part of liberal Western ideas. That debate was taken up again in 49, in 1950s, and then in the year 2000 when we did the amendment. But when we did the amendment of the constitutions in 2000, we include a whole new chapter with the title Human Rights. So that is a big step, progress in 2000. Okay, we look at it later. But also, it is important by way of introduction. The commitment to human rights in Indonesia, it had become much stronger after 1998. So we have a new law on human rights in 1999. We have the amendment of the constitutions, and then we ratify so many human rights conventions which are legally binding. So I have it here listed. The international human rights conventions which were ratified by Indonesia, and when it is ratified, that means it has become Indonesian law. So you can see Undang-Undang Nomor 5 1998, Undang-Undang Nomor 29, which means it has become Indonesian law. It's not something foreign anymore. You cannot call it as Western or whatever. It is very Indonesian because it is part of our law, part of our constitution. And you can see, interestingly, the years of the ratification. Most of the ratifications, starting with CAT. CAT is the Convention of Anti-Torture, Anti-Penyiksaan, Covenant Anti-Penyiksaan. That was in 1998, only a few months after the Reformasi. And then 1999, another one. And then 2005, the two major conventions, the International Convention of Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, and then the International Conventions of Civil, Political Rights. These are the two major conventions which were ratified in 2005, and then others following that. So out of, I hope my list is up to date. If not, then please correct me. But if it's correct that we have 9 international conventions ratified, 7 of them were actually ratified after 1998. So you can see how important actually is the start of the democratization. Okay, I'm going to move next. Okay, so one way to think about rights is to divide it into 3 types. Well, I have to say since the beginning that this kind of categorizations of rights or divisions of rights have been criticized because of many reasons. But I think it's interesting to give us a quick impressions about human rights, what rights are protected. So the so-called first generations of rights, they are civil and political. They are mostly about freedom, freedom of expressions, freedom of religion or belief. So civil and political rights, and most of them are contained in ICCPR, the International Conventions of Civil and Political Rights. These are the rights which were supported very much by the United States and Western European countries. But it was controversial in the Eastern Europe and Russian among the in Russia or Uni-Soviet later. So they don't like very much the first group of rights. They promote the second type of rights, which is more on economic, social, cultural rights. And when you speak about the second type of rights, the role of the state is more active. The state should fulfill actively. Well, in the first generations of life, the state should be passive in a sense. The state should not do anything because the assumption is that people already have all the civil and political rights. The state should not regulate that, because if you regulate that, that means usually regulating something is restricting that thing. So it's called as negative obligation. The state should not limit these rights, where the positive obligations the state should fulfill. So even using the term, if you say you speak about religious freedom, which is part of the first generation of rights, usually you don't say that the state should fulfill rights, but you say, what you say is the state should protect the rights, freedom of religion. In bahasa Indonesia, negara harus melindungi, bukan negara harus memenuhi. Kalau memenuhi itu tipe yang kedua. Kalau yang pertama, negara tidak memenuhi, tidak aktif, tapi melindungi, karena haknya sudah ada di situ. And the second type of rights, it's like, for example, the rights for employment, housing, things like that, the economic, social, cultural. And then later, there is the so-called third generations of rights. And this is more not individual rights. For example, the Stockholm declarations about sustainable development about the environment in 1972. Usually it's called as belonging to the third generations of rights. So the Stockholm Declaration, it was very important. Actually, it was the motivation for the establishment of the Ministry of Environment in Indonesia in 1972. It was the influence of the Stockholm Declaration. And now, this year is 2022, which means it's the 50th years after the Stockholm Declaration. So maybe in the mass media, if you type Stockholm Declaration, you will find many new news or writings about this. So this is a big issue. And then there is the commitment to the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN countries. This is called as the third generations of rights. Like I said, there are critiques by many scholars about this. idea of generations. But again, I mentioned it to you so you get a broader impressions about what kind of rights are there. The criticism, basically, they want to emphasize that you should not divide rights in any ways, because all those rights, they are indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. I think this will also be taken up by Brett in the next class, so I'm not going to speak about this further. Okay, now one way to understand human rights is also to understand, if not human rights, then what? What are the alternatives to human rights? What is human rights a species of? Binatang apa human rights itu? Dia masuk dalam spesies apa atau dalam genus apa? Makhluk apa itu? So if you want to understand that, what creature is this? What animal is this? What beast is human rights? Then you should compare it with others. So one way to of comparisons, which I found, well, this is rather provocative, but I think it's helpful, especially for you, the students of religion, is by Boaventura de Sousa Santos. He's a famous scholar from Brazil. So he said that how do we understand human rights? We should understand human rights as a normative conceptions or grammar of human dignity. So what is its competitor? If it's not human rights, then what is it? So he said, well, we can see that actually there are many movements, many political theologies, so movements which are based on political theologies or on religious understanding, which do not use the human rights language. So if you understand human rights as a movement for emancipation, then there are other alternatives. The clear example in his own region, I mean the Santos region, South America, is, for example, the liberation theology, the Catholic liberation theology. It has its own norms, set of norms. It is not based on human rights, but it is based on Catholic teachings, and it is a movement for emancipation. So you may argue that the theology of liberations, they are in line with human rights, etc. But the proponents of the liberation theology, they don't have the need to justify their theology on human rights or to show its compatibility with human rights. But it's a more contextual movement in particular place. And then, but other than that, what is called as political theology by Santos, there is also the Christian fundamentalist movement in the United States, for example, which also understands itself as a movement for emancipation. And then also many variety of Islamic movement, the progressive one, the conservative one. But Santos says that if you attend the World Social Forum, this is, well, there is the World Economic Forum and then the World Social Forum, in which many social movements leaders come. You will see that there are so many emancipatory movement for emancipation, for liberation, which do not use the language of human rights, but they use their own more particular language. So I think this is helpful in a sense because it gives us an idea If not human rights, then what? So human rights may be understood as a movement for emancipation. And when it was created in 1948, after the Second World War, actually the main idea, I hope some of you already read the Universal Declarations of Human Rights text. The idea was about emancipation, about liberation, about freedom, to free people from the states which are too hegemonic, for example, or tyrannical, authoritarian. And there was, in 1948, the image of, for example, fascism in Germany, Nazi, etc. So human rights is understood as a movement for emancipation. But then again, for Santos, if you speak about movement for emancipations, there are alternative. So what I mentioned before as the view of Santos actually comes from his book with the title, which is also very provocative. Is God were a human rights activist? So this is this question is actually an attempt to try to understand if God were a human rights activist, what would he do now? So Santos is not he's not anti-human rights, but he wants to make a distinction between what he called as hegemonic human rights and counter-hegemonic human rights. That is, he saw that in many developing countries, human rights have become hegemonic. It has lost its emancipatory spirit, and he wants to bring back this emancipatory spirit, this progressiveness, this counter-hegemonic features of human rights. So he made a distinction between what he called as hegemonic and counter-hegemonic human rights. For him, the main thing, the most important thing is what is useful, what can help the project of emancipation. Okay, if you're interested, of course, you can read this book. I will also speak about some of his views later in one of the sessions. But again, I'm showing this to give you an idea about what creature is human rights. So it's a set of norms. It has legal capability. And again, this is something which distinguish human rights regime from liberation theology, for example. In the international human rights regime, many of the conventions were legally binding. So it's a kind of a common language between countries in the international arena to look at each other's performance, each country's performance in protecting rights, in fulfilling certain rights. Well, with liberation theology, for example, of course, this is very particular, very contextual in certain parts of the world. These are some of the distinguishing features. But keep in mind that human rights is most of all in the beginning, the spirit is the emancipation spirit. So it's a movement for emancipation. When now there are criticisms about double standard of applying human rights, for example, or certain countries in the name of human rights invading other countries, then you know what is the criticism. That is when human rights does not become a tool of emancipation, then there is something wrong there. Okay, I think I'm almost done with the my slides. Okay, So I have shown before some relation between human rights and religion. Another important relation between religion and human rights is when you speak about freedom of religion. That is, freedom of religion is one of the rights, is one of the human rights. So this is also part of the an important part of our class. So we will look at human rights, the history, the politics, etc., the universality. How does it relate to religion? That is the first main parts of our course. The second part of the course is freedom of religion or belief. There is a particular freedom, right to freedom under this human rights regime. That will be the second section. So I will skip this. Well, I listed some topics here, but I think I'm not going to speak about it now, probably later. My idea was to give you a kind of, yeah, well, probably first impressions about possible topics when you try to read, to write final papers later. But we can talk about it later. I'll stop here. I already speak for probably half an hour or even more, so I have to stop here. And Dicky, if you want to add, yeah, anything, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Zain. I don't think there is much to add. I mean, you've said all of the things that is necessary, and I think all of the things that I could actually say in one semester. Yeah, but it's there's very hard rain here in Sleman, and so I can hardly hear myself, and so I am outside of my patio because my house is rather dark without the electricity. And I'm just, you know, struggling to listen to myself, yeah. But anyways, thank you for your elaborate introduction, Pak Zain. I think one of the important things to remember in this semester, and specifically this course, is that this will be both theory and practice, so to speak, yeah. And so you will be hearing from experts, from scholars, from human rights lawyers, and so on. But you will also be listening in and being lectured by some of the human rights activists and FOB activists in the region. Yeah, as you know, that this focus of course is on Southeast Asia. So we will be bringing in experts from Southeast Asia into the course as well, and perhaps providing you with a glimpse of what the kinds of problems and issues are related to religion, human rights, and more specifically on freedom of religion or belief, yeah? So you might want to anticipate some of the discussions with our experts from the region. I myself, I am writing a book right now in Bahasa Indonesia on freedom of religion or belief in Southeast Asia. Mas Ipung is to a certain extent helping me with that project, yeah, and so is some other friends. And so for those of you who are thinking about doing your term papers, you might also want to consider doing something along the lines of not just about Indonesia, but maybe another country like Malaysia or Singapore or Vietnam, or you know, something, some country that might interest you, you know, or if you're interested in any of the issues or problems that are more specific to these countries, you might want to consider that as well. Now, there's been a lot of talk about human rights, what human rights is and how that relates to FOB, which is freedom of religion or belief. You know, it was previously freedom of religion and belief, you know, and somehow along the lines, they changed the title to freedom of religion or belief. And so, you know, these are all very technical legal terms. So you need to be very aware and be, you know, conscientious in terms of the terms used. Yeah. So the difference between and or is obviously very political and very legal, in the sense that we do not want to sort of put religion and belief in an orderly manner, so to speak, right? Where religion comes first and then belief, right? So the idea of changing the phraseology from freedom of religion and belief to freedom of religion or belief is exactly with that kind of intention, yeah, and consideration, to say that religion and belief are on the same category, yeah, and hence you have the term or belief now, yeah. So that's one small minor detail which you might want to ponder and wonder about, you know. The other thing is there is human rights, and then there's also human dignity. And where you find any laws and regulations and processes and articles and documents on human rights, you would also find ultimately human dignity. In fact, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you would find human dignity in both the preamble as well as in the first article of the declaration. So you might want to also ponder and wonder about what is the difference between human rights and human dignity. Why does dignity come first in the articles regarding you know, human rights, for instance? Yeah, I mean, we have articles 28 and 29 in our constitution, yeah, but we also have in our preamble about dignity, about harkat dan martabat kemanusiaan, right? And it's used sort of interchangeably with harkat kemanusiaan, martabat manusia, kemanusiaan, and so on in many of the laws and regulations in Indonesia. Yeah, and so you need to know exactly what is the difference between human rights and human dignity. Yeah, and of course there's been a major debate about this, and I've in fact also debated about this with some of my European friends. You know, they say that, you know, they don't want to help promote human dignity, but they want to help promote human rights. You know, but I was arguing to them, look, you know, human dignity is, in essence, you know, one of the most important things in human rights. That's why they put human dignity or dignity in the first articles of many of the, you know, laws and regulations, conventions in ICCPR and all of the sort of policy frameworks and legal frameworks of human rights. But they are convinced much more that human rights is clear when it comes to the duty bearer, when it comes to who should be responsible to uphold human rights, as opposed to human dignity. Yeah, because for human dignity, it's like, okay, everyone is probably responsible, right, to give respect to any one person that he or she meets, for instance. Yeah, but human rights, who is the duty bearer? Who is the main duty bearer of human rights? And that is obviously the state, right? In this modern age of you know, nation states, it is actually the state, the government, that needs to uphold the human rights. And this makes things a lot easier to talk about human rights than human dignity. Yeah. And so please be mindful of this as we progress along the semester, that you have that in the back of your mind. The other thing is that human rights is very much attached to individual rights. Yeah, so individuals having rights. Yeah, and so obviously for many societies that are perhaps still agrarian, traditional, or even religious, they might find this very problematic, right? Because many traditional societies, agrarian societies, they don't see the individual as the first line of order of their thinking. You see, it's oftentimes the community first and then the individual. Yeah. So it's the interest of the community first and then the individual. So hence we are dealing with discussions and debates about individual rights and also community rights. Right? So you need to also ponder and wonder about this, you know, what is the most appropriate deliberation or debate here in Indonesia? Are we more geared towards individual rights or community rights or group rights or communal rights, so to speak? Yeah, because we also have very traditional indigenous communities who hardly see themselves as a collection of individuals, yeah, but they see themselves as essentially communities, as one community, as one people, sharing the same kind of worldview, sharing the same kind of customs, same kind of belief systems, right? So you have these differences of opinion. You have these distinctions in the way people look at rights and people look at dignity. So you need to be fully aware of these nuanced understanding, yeah, between human rights and human dignity. And then the other thing is that when you talk about rights, in Europe, they have what's called fundamental rights. Now, what is the difference between fundamental rights and human rights? Yeah, we need to also be clear about this. In some sense, in the general sense of the word, fundamental rights usually refers to more specifically on one country or one nation or one region for that matter. Yeah, so if the European Union believes in fundamental rights, then it is assumed that fundamental rights have already been sort of recognized in the constitutions and in the regulations, in the policy frameworks, and so on and so forth. Whereas human rights has this pretense of being an international norm, being in the international law and regulation that needs to be complied by all nations, by all countries, by anyone, essentially, right? So you have, again, a different use of phrases, a different use of terminologies, which you need to be fully aware of. And then Zain also mentioned about the Islamic Declaration of Human Rights. Now, you might want to ask the question, why do Muslims have to always be different? Why do they have to have a different set of declarations on human rights? What is wrong with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Yeah, and what is so Islamic about human rights? Yeah, so I think we need to sort of get over these questions and issues as we progress along this semester, so that everyone can get a good glimpse in terms of the distinctions, the debates, the deliberations, and the categories used and the phraseologies used by different agencies, different intellectuals, different scholars, and different countries, if you like. I think what Zain mentioned earlier about Santos's idea about the emancipatory human rights, or more emancipative form of human rights, I think this is very important. I think, as you can probably realize, that human rights has indeed become a tool of certain countries' foreign policy, right? So it's a basis of a foreign policy of certain countries. Like in the United States, despite its establishment clause, which means that they have a stipulation in their federal constitution to disallow any subsidies to any religious institutions, you see that now they have what's called the International Religious Freedom Office, yeah, that is under the US State Department, that has an ambassador at large who is going around and telling the world that, you know, you guys are not doing well in your international religious freedom indices, for instance, or your index, yeah, that you need to be better in building up your legal framework or your rule of law in protecting religious minorities and this and that, yeah. So that's one way of looking at the instrumentalization of human rights. And this is why I think that argument pertaining to the emancipatory or the hegemonic and the counter-hegemonic discourse on human rights becomes quite essential and significant. Yeah. Even for Indonesia, as you know, we are using Indonesian Islam as a tool of our foreign policy, using religious harmony, for instance, religious pluralism as part and parcel of our sort of diplomacy, efforts in diplomacy, yeah, with respect to engaging issues on religion, issues on terrorism, issues pertaining to the organization of Islamic countries, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I mean, it's not something very exclusive that some of these categories are being used and instrumentalized in some countries' foreign policies. So I think I'll stop at that, and hopefully we will have a good discussion ensuing. Thank you very much, Pak Zain.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Dicky. Okay, now it's your turn. Anyone who wants to give comments, whatever, or probably you already mentioned your expectations. Do you think you will get? Okay, I see Ahdar and Eli. Please, Ahdar, you're first.
I have read the syllabus and see there are only 5 countries that we will talk about human rights. I didn't see as Brunei Darussalam, and I actually really excited to see the human rights in Papua New Guinea and East Timor and so forth. Why don't we have them? Thank you.
Yeah, well, somehow we have to choose. Maybe we should create another course because there are so many countries. Or Pak Dicky, you may want to respond to that also. Why not Brunei Darussalam, for example?
Yeah, for the last 2 years, I've been doing research on FORB in Southeast Asia. And one of the glaring things about the region is that there's not much to go on with in terms of the data sets from Brunei Darussalam. I've also spoken to some of the people in Brunei Darussalam. I mean, I lived there for 9 months, maybe some 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And I can tell you that Brunei Darussalam is still a sort of a black hole when it comes to issues of human rights and freedom of religion or belief. But what we know is that they have the Sharia law being implemented since 2013, and it was reinforced in 2019. And obviously, many of the religious and ethnic minorities in Brunei have called this sort of policy and legalization of the Sharia law to be somewhat offside, meaning to say that the ethnic groups, aside from the Malay Muslims and the indigenous people there, are actually excluded. As far as I know, many of the non-Malay Muslims have no citizenship in Brunei Darussalam. But again, we are also confronting issues with data set and also informants. There's not a lot of experts and scholars and people within Brunei Darussalam who would want to talk about human rights or FORB in Brunei Darussalam unless they want to be booted out of the country or be jailed by the Sultan.
Okay, thanks. Eddie, please.
Thank you, Pak Zain, Pak Dicky. From this first meeting, I discovered that human rights is very complicated
because we can overlap it with human dignity and so on. And from Pak Zain explanation, I see that there is 3 stages or 3 develop
generations
of
yeah.
the human rights, the first, the second, and the third. My question is whether in the next human right can develop and or evolve, and who can determine the standard that, or how can I agree that yes, that it's a human right or no, and what is the standard for me to agree that something is included in human rights or no, and how can what determine the evolution or the development of the human rights? Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. A very important question, which is still being discussed until today. Does human right still develop, evolve? Of course, yes, that's for sure. How does it develop? So just to give you an example, when the Universal Declarations of Human Rights was written in 1948, there was not much of an awareness of gender equality, for example. Even some of the terms used in the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, it may be questioned today. Who is the human in human rights? Mostly, the main idea at that time, man. Even though women play important role, well, you will hear from Brett Scharf about the role of Eleanor Roosevelt in the writing of Universal Declarations of Human Rights, but there was not much of gender equality awareness, for example, or the awareness of indigenous people. It's absent from the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, but then it develops as the feminist movement and then the indigenous people movement, they develop. They wanted to assert, to add this weakness. So we see, for example, the CEDAW, the conventions on eliminations of discrimination among women, I think. So one particular document on women. And then much later, I think in 1990s, probably 1992, there was a declaration of the rights of indigenous people. So it came later. Why? Because in 1948, it was not as important as today. Another example, which people has been discussing actually, also now there has been lots of discussion about equality in terms of sexual orientation, the LGBT, etc. So I saw a very interesting comment in the Padlet. Ahdar wants to get arguments to say that he doesn't support the LGBT, for example. Okay. And then Andi, I think, says, well, he will respond to Ahdar. So that's interesting. So the language of LGBT or sexual orientation, it was not there. But now, until now, there is nothing, no declaration regarding that. But it has been in the discussion. So that is one example or illustration about how human rights develops. And then another thing is that there were countries which in 1948 they were not independent yet, actually. Only later, many small states who didn't have much say in the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. Now there is more and more opportunity for them to be involved, including, well, Pak Dicky mentions about the Islamic countries. They are now very assertive through the organizations of Islamic cooperation, for example, they have been successful, for example, in initiating one resolution on combating intolerance. This is part of the motivation was to fight Islamophobia in the European countries. Many Muslim minorities in European countries, they suffer from discrimination, Islamophobia, etc. So these organizations of Islamic cooperations, they initiated this this resolution, and it was accepted in 2011, I think, unanimously. So this kind of things are taking place. Again, just like with the declarations of the anti-discriminations among women, the indigenous people, or the LGBT, etc. It has always been controversial. The same with that resolution, but this is the nature of the debate. So you have a space. This is not an empty space. We cannot think that everyone has equal space. Of course, there is some power relation. Now there are certain countries in the UN, for example, which have more power than others. So it's not equal power relation. But you have also seen the evolution, the development of the human rights regime. So it's a work in progress. When you write Heiner Bielefeld's book, you will find this term about work in progress a lot. That's how he imagined human rights. Okay.
Pak Sen,
Yeah.
it means that human rights is a consensus or not?
Yes, consensus, which is called convention or covenants or resolution. So this term, resolution, covenant, conventions, these are terms referring to the consensus. I give the example of the resolution 1618 on combating intolerance, which was accepted unanimously in 2011. But before that, the organizations of Islamic conference or cooperation, they actually propose a resolution on defamation of religion, a kind of resolution prohibiting blasphemy. And that was not popular. Many countries, they didn't agree with that. And that's why it didn't well, it became a resolution, but not much support for many years. But in 2011, when they have this idea about changing it into a resolution on combating intolerance, it was accepted unanimously. So you see ideas which did not gain support, but you see also ideas which gain support. So yes, of course, it has to be a consensus, although I have to remind you again, of course, there is always unequal power relation, which does not make, which makes the process is not ideal most of the time, but that's the situation. Mas Irfan, please.
Yes. Okay, Pak Zen. Discussing about the human rights is very complicated. There's many slices in the human rights. But what I thought highlights how to apply this human right in our society or nation. Some such issue or case, maybe Ahok or Leah Aiden, and the other issue about this slash of human right. Okay, I know there is a barrier between one right to the other right, but if we learn or study about human right, what so we could contribute to our nation? Maybe we can change amendment or give some amendment from the what we say undang-undang pelecehan agama, maybe, yeah. That's what I want to know. What we contribute already know. What is buried? What the place of human right not to because what has do maybe from the other cases not maybe in my place such indigenous people or Japanese people when at the midnight of Suro, they walk around village without any clothes. I think this is some what we say some harassment maybe. Even when they talk or using another voice and other. That I want to know if we learn or study about human, what we contribute to our nation and for the better future. Next, thanks.
Yeah, well, I'll try to answer it quickly. Probably Pak Dicky would also add. Well, actually, it's a big question, but probably I don't answer your question directly. But think about human rights as a weapon to resist or fight the much more powerful authority or power, the state. So some people call human rights as the weapon of the weak. So human rights protect individuals from what? Mostly from the state, from the tyrannical state or the authoritarian state. So if you don't have any, if you are weak, you are just lay people, you don't have power to resist the state, for example, human rights give you a language to resist this power. So the understanding of the state as duty bearer, that means the state has to protect the rights. And the state, that also means that you can demand the state. And to some extent, if there is a gross violations of human rights, pelanggaran HAM berat, which the state doesn't care, or which the state itself did, then it may go up to the international forum. It is very rare. Yeah, it is very rare. It's very difficult, I mean, to bring the state to the court, except when there is, for example, genocide, like, for example, what happened in Bosnia many years ago. So in extreme cases like that, you can see how human rights may be, yeah, it has teeth. In most cases, actually, it's difficult to go to that extent. But again, the idea is that human rights is a kind of a language or a weapon which may be used for emancipation. So what does it contribute to Indonesia? Well, for people, for civil society organizations, etc., for individuals, it gives you a language which you can use to demand the state. Especially human rights are already in our constitution, so you can bring the state, you can even question certain laws using the arguments of human rights. Although I have to mention also, well, the rights which are protected by the human rights regimes, actually, they are not always very specific. Some are quite specific, but like freedom of expression, for example. What constitutes freedom of expression? Freedom of religion. What is it? How can it be limited? In what condition, etc.? Which religion is free for example. So sometimes there are problems in interpretations. So it's not a quick instrument. It's not an easy instrument. It's not a obat yang manjur setiap saat. You just drink it and then the disease gone. No, you have to argue. You have to build your arguments, etc. So you give the example, the case of Ahok or Leah Eden, for example, whether imprisoning them means violations of human rights. If you ask me, I can build my argument to say yes, it's a violation of human rights, but well, there is a debate about that. It's not immediately clear, actually. For some issues of violations of human rights. If it's genocide, of course, it's clear. But if it's with regard to freedom of expression, freedom of religion, it's not always that clear. Pak Dicky, you want to add to that?
Well, not really, because this is really a sort of an open-ended question. But the question does make us all think, more critically about, again, going back to Ellie's question about who decides, who brings, who are invited to the table in terms of, discussing the principles and norms of human rights. Yeah. I mean, and what about these communitarian societies where they look more towards their community as opposed to the individuals in their community, right? But we need to know, I guess, the context of how human rights came about. Most of it probably is based on the Second World War experience, with the Nazis and all, and obviously war is always a tragedy, and that human rights is always being violated during big wars, and so I guess there is a new realization that we need to protect people from the Leviathan, so to speak, from this great monster whose power is too huge, and so it depends on the context as well. I think your question begs contextuality, begs the question of, what if people are more concerned with community rights than individual rights? And remember, this is only about human rights. Some people now are already talking about multi-species, the approach on multi-species, on the ecology, on the ecosystem. So it's not just about the well-being of the humans, but also the animal kingdom, the plants and trees, right? I mean, we know the story about how in New Zealand that a lake has been given and bestowed the category of personhood, for instance, right? Meaning to say that it has now become a legal standing subject of law, right? And so I guess the same kind of question can be raised for human rights. I mean, who does this human right benefit really? Does it benefit the state? Does it benefit the individual? Does it benefit the community, or does it benefit everyone, or what? I think we need to sort of ask those very fundamental and profound questions. The other thing is, I mean, if you were to ask me, how can we contribute? I think one of the way is to look deep into yourself. How do you see human rights? Do you see the human rights as infringing on your sort of belief as a Muslim, for instance? And how does Islam view human rights? How does Catholicism view human rights, or Protestantism, or Hinduism, or Buddhism, or Confucianism? I think these are very valid questions. Are they consistent with our beliefs? are they consistent with our convictions to these various religions and belief systems? I think those are very profound questions that we need to ask ourselves. Yeah, and so, you know, I know Pak Zen is much more of an advocate of human rights, but I can sometimes be a devil's advocate, and I think it would be useful for me to play that role sometimes throughout the semester. So to give you some ideas and ways in which to sort of critically assess some of the sort of basic assumptions of our course on religion and human rights. Thank you, Pak Zen.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. I think we can still take some questions before. Okay, Shara, please.
Yeah. Hello, Pak Zainal, Pak Dicky. I want to ask, like, on the one hand, we have human rights in the United Nations. It's a value upheld by the UN and like should be upheld by other countries too. But on the other hand, we also have like the value of respecting sovereignty. So like I'm wondering, like, to what extent a country can interfere in like promoting human rights in other countries without breaching the sovereignty of other countries, because like usually the argument is like okay, this country interferes in like other countries' affairs, and like it's what also happens in like Papua case, I think. So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll try to answer quickly, and maybe Pak Dicky will add. Well, actually, I will not answer that. That is a big question. But you're right, that is an important question. When there was these ASEAN declarations of human rights, for example, it has articles which basically weaken the commitment to human rights by this clause about national sovereignty. Well, next week, I will lead a class on universalism and particularism, and also touch on the notion of Asian values, for example. So the Asian values notion is basically an argument about that we, the Asian, should have our own national sovereignty instead of bowing to the international human rights, for example. So yeah, I just want to say that's a legitimate question. We'll address that later. Pak Dicky, you want to respond to that?
Well, maybe just a little bit. Yeah, Pak Zain is very correct in saying that, you know, all this idea about human rights has been sort of guised under this sort of idea that it is a universal principle, that it is a universal value that needs to be upheld and respected by everyone, by every country, every nation on earth. Yeah. So that is a basic sort of assumption, an underlying assumption at least. But then there is that universalization, that universal appeal as well to the idea of human rights. But again, in some countries and societies, as I mentioned earlier, the more communitarian, the more traditional, perhaps the more agrarian, if you like, yeah, that, you know, they would much prefer the idea of community rights as opposed to human rights, which is based on individual rights. Yeah, and I think Pak Zen had already mentioned the idea about Asian values, for instance, which is very much Asian, I would say, you know, but it's not really well understood. It's woefully unexplained. But I think the idea is to say that, you know, we in Asia here have a different way of looking at things, have a different way of operating in society, that we are much more communitarian as opposed to individualized, you know, citizens who want this or want that from the state, you know. And what's more, I think, we need to distinguish between the more advanced democracies with their longer tradition in the rule of law. Yeah, I think we are much more sort of still on the way towards that end. But, you know, we still have some sort of cultural mechanisms, still ways of social negotiating if any differences were to occur in society, right? And again, the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights, I think, is an important document that you all need to familiarize yourself with. There's Article 22, more specifically about freedom of religion, belief, human rights, and so on. But again, the principle of a non-interference and non-intervention, which is embedded in the ASEAN Charter, I think poses a problem simply because, you know, there is that sort of ASEAN way of doing things, yeah, and this has been established and recognized for a long time in ASEAN. Hence, the very weak response to the kinds of human rights abuses going on in Myanmar, for instance, or previously in Vietnam, in Cambodia, yeah, and so on and so forth, yeah. So we need to bring these issues up once in a while so that we are reminded that there are sort of alternative counter-hegemonic norms and practices at play.
Thank you, Pak Zain, Pak Dicky.
Yeah, well, as with any course that we have, we have to always be critical to everything. So even to human rights, many people probably take it for granted. But of course, critical doesn't mean that we don't like it or we oppose it, but yeah, using a critical perspective, understanding the limitations, etc. Okay, the last one, Paulus or Eko? How should I call you?
Yes, you can call me Paulus or Eko.
Okay. Please,
Yeah.
Mas Eko.
Thank you very much for the explanation, Pak Zainal and Pak Dicky. I remember about the situation when the sexual abuse law, undang-undang pelecehan seksual, and when we'll see the situation, and this is connected with CEDAW. But why Indonesian is difficult to get this law? And when we correlate it with human rights, it's true, but it is very difficult and hard, so hard. Need so many times to get this law. And there are the question, the situation, another situation like Kamisan held in Jakarta. I live in Jakarta, and this is the Human Rights Act. When talk about how some people cannot do their human rights, so they always do the Kamisan. And there are many kind of situation why it's so difficult to get human rights, or this is a politic, or this is not only wrong human rights maybe, or everything but another ideology. Maybe the question is based on the Pak Zainal and Pak Dicky experience, maybe can add or give us an explanation about it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a big question, and I hope you yourself will answer that question. Hopefully, probably by the end of this course. I cannot answer that question. You may ask it, of course. Keep that question, keep it alive. You may ask it to other lecturers, etc. But it's a complex question. If I answer it now, it doesn't mean much. So, and also we don't have time. So, Pak Dicky, you want to say something about that? No, okay. Okay, so we have to close the class. But before that, well, I assume you are familiar with Google Classroom. Anyone who is not familiar with Google Classroom, raise your hand. 3, 2, 1. No. Okay, so I assume you are familiar. Look at that. You have the syllabus there. What I want to remind you is that the next class, oh yeah, for each class, what we want you to do to prepare yourself is first read the reading, the assigned reading, and then secondly, watch the video Some of the videos are for 1 hour. Later, there's probably 20 minutes, etc. But I think the longest will be 1 hour. So you have to do this too. Otherwise, you're not going to get much benefit, because our meeting, I mean, face-to-face meeting through Zoom, we will devote this for question and answer. So there's not going to be a lecture. Today is exceptional because this is the first class. But for the next class, the minute we start the meeting, the Zoom, then it's question and answer between you and the lecturer. So you need to prepare by reading the assigned reading, the assigned text, and watch the video. For next Wednesday, this is a special time. Our class meeting will be at, did I mention 8 or 9 a.m.? I think 8 a.m., right? 8, yeah. Because we have Professor Brett Scharf, who is in the US with 12 or 13 hours difference. So it will be his evening. So do the reading, watch it, and then submit your weekly response. I also asked you to submit the response earlier because we plan to send it to Brett before the class. So Brett can also respond to your question. So that's it for now. One special request to Intan, please fill in your Padlet, because I want to have a complete album of our class. I will show it. I will share it to you after Intan fills it in. Okay.
Excuse me, Pak Zen, do you see mine, Pak Zen? Because I did it this morning, but I don't see.
I think I saw it.
Okay, but okay. I mean that I'm done. Okay.
Yeah, let me check again. I think oh no. Yours is not there, Mas Ipung.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, do it once again.
Okay, Pak Zen.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it. It's going to be a nice album. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and see you again next Wednesday in 2 days from now at 8 a.m. Please don't forget. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak.